magic box. All right, good. All right, so let's get into this. And I know it would have been good to get to some of these slides the other day, but we did not. So power law size distributions, right? So we have these things that look good on a log-log plot, right? They seem to be straight lines, or they certainly have a nice wide spread out there. As we said, they could be heavy-tailed distributions. They don't have to be exactly power law size distributions. But we have mechanisms that give rise to all of these things, and we can test and say, okay, it really is kind of a system that's producing a power law as opposed to a log normal.
Can I ask a question about the last thing?
Sure.
So when they're measuring, how do they account for, there's a new word, but that doesn't follow the rules, say from Spanish, but it's not English, so it's not counted in the new survey of the English language.
So a word that's been brought in from Spanish.
How do they say, oh, this makes the cut as a word that's being, like if we're losing words, we might be gaining them. But how
Yeah, so that's another thing. Words tend not to absolutely die, which is interesting, right? They're sort of floating around somewhere. This is about their conjugation changing. So the words have been there for a long time. It's just that they move from, maybe I'm not saying the right thing, but so let's say, to buy, right? At some point we say we bought. At some point we start to say enough kids say I buyed it, and eventually everyone gives up and they're like, okay.
But I guess let's say that, how do you, when you the buy, or let's say that had its etymology in a foreign language, but like kids start using it, say?
Yeah.
How do you?
Yeah.
Like this is, it's a foreign. How do you know? Okay, we're including in our new English pool. Like because the old English has words that are very rare now, and then the new English pool has presumably words that didn't.
Yeah. So but the thing with Google, I guess what I was trying to say with Google is it's introduced it's regular straight away. Like there's no.
Okay.
Yeah.
But let's say
because this rule is so dominant now. Like to introduce an irregular verb, that would be an achievement. There's some story about quiz being a word that was introduced, right, as a game.
So it doesn't.
Make up a new word.
Happen the words come in
No.
Other languages and
No.
Okay.
No. We really want to impose this. It's so far down this, kind of rabbit hole that we want to actually we want to impose those rules all the time. And Old English had all these frills attached to things, right? So if you say, the cow, and this is not really true, but the cow jumped over the fence, like the jumped would have that it kind of has inside it that it's a cow, and there was a fence, like it has all these other pointers to other parts of what you're talking about. And then collectively, we realized that context could do all the work, right? That we could just, sequence things, and there's a jump, but you have to listen to everything else and put it all together. But there was extra stuff that we strapped on earlier to sort of like, help convey things properly.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, that's all right. It's good.
Words are very frequently introduced from other languages into our language, like taboo, boondocks.
Sure.
Kind of words.
Well, it depends on the language. I mean, English is pretty good at doing that. Yeah. Pajamas. Especially ones that are fun to say. Or you apparently didn't have pajamas, right? Yeah. But this is about verbs, like, what happens when they come in. Discotheque. We gave them weekend, though. Apparently they didn't have, and le camping. Anyway, it goes on forever. Right, the French have rules. You're not allowed to use too much English. Right, on a billboard or whatever, this get upset. Ridiculous language, the English. Okay, so this is just some sense of what we're talking about here, right? So for the Gaussians, this just to quickly get this again. Gaussians, the typical member, right? You've got something that's mediocre. It's in between. This is this Taleb framing. But then the black part here is what you have with these parallelized size distributions. There's no internal scale that matters more than anything else. So either your average thing is a giant thing or a tiny thing. And this depends on this exponent being greater or less than 2. We'll come back to that more and more. So there are various other pieces here. Prediction is easy. That's a very important thing. Prediction is hard here. Big surprises happen, big jumps. All right, that's okay. You will have, for the economists, you will surely heard of Pareto. So often these distributions are what we call Pareto distributions, just simply, that's a term that's used. And Pareto studied was wealth, right? I think in the late 1800s in Italy. Yes, I have it here. And this is where you get some of these terms like 80-20 rule, that 80% of the population, for example, has 20% of the wealth, and the flip of that. That's a useful thing, or 90% of the work takes 10% of the time, and 10% of the right, and 10% of the time is 90% of the work. People have this sort of it's a way of breaking these things down. But of course, we want to look at the whole distribution over and over again. Yep. And we know in general people are pretty good at, well, statistics is a bad thing for people. Means are something we can talk about, averages, but standard deviation is like a step too far, right? And okay, so we want to be able to constantly look at distributions and not forget what's going on with those. Dismal science, right? Yeah. I thought that meant that it was just a bad science, but it was that the predictions or what came out of economics, the sort of things they would suggest about humanity weren't great. Okay.